But if you know your people and you know that just because they don't act intense and driven like I am, doesn't mean they're not driven to accomplish, but it may not be and demonstrated like, oh,
So adapting to your people is sometimes adapting or changing your expectations of how they can. Discover Your Spiritual Gifts is a new online Bible study we have created here at Place Ministries to help people discover their spiritual gifts and meditate on how to understand them and see them in their own lives. For almost 30 years, my dad has sat down with thousands of people around the world and heard an overwhelming desire for believers to not just know their gifts, but to understand them. This study is for them. This study is for you, to equip your people and to encourage your people, and to show them how God has been, can be, and will continue to use them through their spiritual gifts. Hey y'all, welcome to the My Place podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Mary McSwain, and I'm joined, as I normally am, by my dad, Jay McSwain.
And it's good to be joined as you normally are by your dad. So good to be here with you, Mary.
Good to be here with you too in this warm, sunny weather we've been having.
Yeah, if people go back and look at some of our previous ones, we always had I may wear a sweater for next week, I don't know. But we have, both of us have short sleeves on, and the time changed, and the weather's beautiful here in Atlanta. Feels like a great spring day, and it is good to be here.
How are you doing with the time change? We lost an hour a couple days ago.
Well, no, I like the time change because I like it staying dark later. So, no, I like time change.
But have you caught up on your sleep yet?
I have been, matter of fact, one of our coworkers, Barbara, said, you sounded a little down today. And I told her, I said, actually, I've been tired. So, yes, I have been a little tired.
I think I fell asleep at 7 o'clock on Sunday.
Oh, wow.
And I will say I normally go to bed pretty early anyway, but I fell asleep on the couch around 7 o'clock.
I didn't go to sleep Sunday. I was sitting here Sunday at 9 o'clock with a group of men that I meet with. So
a long day on a day when you got an hour less.
And yesterday I traveled to go see a young man that is in college in South Carolina. So I got back in last night, and we got today, and I got church tomorrow night. And so, yeah, a lot of nights. I got a wedding this weekend. And then I'm flying out of town right after church on Sunday just for the day, be back. And, yeah, we got a lot of things going on.
Life goes on. And yet somehow you still have time to read all those books that you always read that we talked about last week. We actually, for those of y'all who might want to go back in the archives, just out of curiosity, we did a whole episode on all the books that Dad reads because he is an avid reader. But we're going to start off our conversation, the show today, with a recommendation. Are there any good books that you've read on leadership before?
This is going to be really strange if people go and get the book. Years and years ago, I read a book called Too Great a Temptation by Dr. Joel Gregory. Dr. Gregory was probably considered in the Southern Baptist Convention one of the greatest preachers in the last 100 years. He pastored a church in Fort Worth, and then Dr. W.A. Criswell at First Baptist Dallas, who had been there 50-something years, tapped Dr. Gregory to go be his successor. Long and short, Too Great a Temptation, he had a moral failure. And it was one of the great books I've read about what I think leaders ought to be aware of, especially if they have a lot of success and people put them up on pedestals. And it was a lot of good, and I've said this, as you know, I've served on a trustee board at a seminary. I serve on the board of a university right now. I believe every young preacher ought to read that book because it is a great book that shows how sometimes as leaders we can believe our own press clippings and sometimes can make really bad decisions. But Dr. Joel Gregory. I think you can still get the book, and it's called Too Great a Temptation.
I know as a leader, it can be a really hard place to be. It can be one of the most rewarding, but also one of the most challenging. And having tools in your toolbox, like a sense of awareness of what some things could be that can cause you to stumble, that can trip you up, that can be one of the greatest, most valuable tools in your toolbox that you can keep building the legacy that you've been entrusted with. And leadership is what we're talking about today.
Can I give one more?
Yes, please.
So about 25 years ago, I actually like this one because I got interviewed for it, but George Barna, who many have considered probably one of the leading Christian pollsters of the last 50 years, George Barna wrote a book called Building Effective Ministry Teams. And he interviewed me for it. But what I thought was good about it was not just for ministry teams, but building teams. And then, again, just things that need to go into when you're building teams. So, and then there's one other book that I think is a great leadership book. I should have had it today. I'm sorry. It's actually in my office. It's called Are You Committed? And yours truly wrote it. But it talks about if you're going to, it talks about things that you have to do. Are you committed to connecting God's people to meaningful ministry? And it really is things like, are you equipping people? Are you encouraging those that you put in leadership? Are you having a way to identify people, which is what we're going to talk about in a minute? Are you multiplying them? And so there's 6 principles in there that I talk about that I think any good leader would do well to read that book. I wrote it, wow, it's crazy, 19 years ago, but I believe it's pretty timeless in the principles.
All 3 of those books sound like great tools in your toolbox as a leader. What are some other effective tools that you've seen leaders use on their team?
Well, I think you would consider this a tool. You and I talk about this a lot. I told you I met with a young man that is a senior in college. And when we sat, he had asked to have lunch with me, a late lunch. He drove an hour and a half. I drove an hour up to meet him. And, he had another hour and a half to get back home. He's on spring break. So the first thing I said to him, and I think any great leader it's a great tool to use. I said to him, Max, what would you like for us to accomplish as we have both driven to have this lunch together? And I think we were in the restaurant like 2.5 hours. And I wrote down, as you know, word for word what he said. And as we carried on the conversation, I took notes. So I think a great toolbox to have is to ask people when you sit down with them. And it sometimes sounds like, wow, is this an interview? But it's, especially for the leader, it really gives them a framework of where to stay in leading whatever the conversation is about. So I think that ought to go in everybody's toolbox, is to learn how to ask questions. And the first question is always good. What's your purpose? What's your objective? If you're trying to pour in as a leader, if you're trying to pour into them.
I agree with that. Great leaders ask great questions. And one of the things that I believe that Place does, it helps you identify what are some of those questions that you need to ask. Because you want to ask a question like, what do you want to accomplish? What is your goal out of this role, out of this year, out of this conversation? One of my executive pastor always asks when we meet, how can I help you? How can I serve you? What can I do for you? And there's such a servant's heart in that. Those are great questions that you can ask anybody. But a tool like Place, when you can look at who somebody is, it helps direct you to some of those more specific questions so that as a leader, you know the question that the person right in front of you really needs to be asked in light of who they are. And that's really what we're going to dive a little bit deeper into today, is how could a tool like Place be a tool in a leader's toolbox? What value have you seen Place bring to leaders?
I think it takes them light years down the road. Even in say our conversation, it gives them so much insight to be listening to. I don't. Have we had a podcast since I got back from California, where I was at Gateway Seminary?
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell the story again. Okay, this is how it helps. I sit down with a young lady. She's from Korea. And she got her undergraduate in social work. She got her master's. She came to America, to seminary, and she got her master's in Christian counseling. And she kept using the word systems. I actually started writing down every time. And I said to her after about 20 minutes, I said, do you know you've used a certain word? Probably and I counted up. I said 7 times. You've used the word systems. Well, part of what made me even heightened aware and where a tool like Place helps is her second highest spiritual gift was administration. And she liked systems. One of her other highest gifts was mercy. Well, social work, Christian counseling, mercy. But where a tool like Place works also is when you know what they may be lowest in. Her next to lowest score was in the pastor shepherd. Well, the shepherd would oftentimes leave and felt drawn to leave the 99 to go to the 1. That's what the shepherd, that's next to her last. So I'm sitting there listening to her, taking notes, and she goes, I think she said the word guilty. I'd like to say convicted. I feel guilty that I came all the way to America to get my master's in Christian counseling. And I feel emotionally drained sitting with people. And because I recognize a shepherd wouldn't feel emotionally drained because they want to go to the 1. She said, but with social work, I feel like I love the systems, administration. And so I told her, I said, so what you really see yourself as being more behind the scenes, because putting together systems for those that want to be on the front lines doing a lot of the counseling. And it was almost like a light bulb, like a light just beamed on her. But Mary, the question was, what does a tool like Place do? I was aware to be listening to the words that she was saying and what she was saying, what maybe she felt fulfilled in, and I was looking at where I could bring back to her. That's because you have the gift of. You don't have the gift of. And so it gave me things to be listening that I might not have picked up on if I had not had the profile that she completed of herself through spiritual gifts being one of them, one of the 5 areas.
So a tool for any good leader is to ask good questions, but Place can help you know what to listen for once you ask the question.
And sometimes to know what questions to ask.
Yes.
I'll give you. So I demonstrate passion by. That's one of the 5 elements in Place that and we give you a list of how you demonstrate passion, developing and creating. Well, what does that look like for you? What have been some environments you've seen yourself developing, creating, or if they rank them all, and they're sitting there saying why they don't like something? Like for me, if you listen to me, I say this all the time, I can start anything. I don't know how to manage, organize, improve, or perfect squat. Well, if you're listening or you look at the tool, you would see those are at the very bottom for me. So it just gives you, your mom likes to use this word a lot, it gives you handles to start with, and you don't have to start with a blank sheet. Well, this isn't a blank sheet of paper, but a blank sheet of paper.
It's interesting that you brought that up about how you like to start things, but you're not always great at finishing them. I was listening to a podcast on leadership talking about different leaders and how this leader placed his leaders into different seasons or onto different projects in light of some of their skills.
How could Place help identify what type of leader someone might be or could become? For example, will they be a better leader in a role that primarily maintains or manages or develops or launches?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at someone like, let's say that they're a C personality, they have maybe they have the gift of leadership, but they also have the gift of administration. They're conventional. They like structure and boxes. Artistic is at the very bottom. They rank as their passion at the bottom, developing, creating, but they put at the top organizing, managing, improving, and perfecting. Well, you know they're going to be a better manager probably of something that's already there than they are going to be a trailblazer of taking a blank nothing and creating it. So and the other side would be if you find someone that is an I personality or a D, and administration, they get a participation for that spiritual gift, and they're very artistic, they think outside the box. You know they're going to be good at starting things and creating things that don't have any structure. They're good at the beginning. So it tells you almost immediately some things to be looking for without putting the person, as we talk about a lot, in a what?
In a box.
In a box, that's the exact word. But it gives you some, again, I use that word handles to know what might be a starting point.
So you are looking at their Place profile in full, which looks at someone's personality, spiritual gifts, abilities, passions, and life experiences, their Place profile, and looking at how each one of those elements work together to see if they would thrive in a season where you're launching something or developing something or maintaining something. How do you ensure, though, that you're not discounting somebody from an opportunity when you're looking at their profile? You're asking them good questions, you're listening to them, but some people could say you're discounting them and you're not giving them an opportunity, while other people would say you're protecting them from an environment where they won't thrive. What would you say to that?
I'd say if I listen to them well enough, and again, as you know, I take notes. And if I'm listening and taking notes, then I'm asking them questions. Now, if I'm the one that is going to put them in that role, I've got to protect, if I'm over that area or that entity in a business, I got to protect the organization, the ministry, the business, and I don't want to put them in a role that they would fail or that they would not be the best person for that role in the organization, the ministry, the business, or whatever. But if I'm listening to them and writing, if they're being true, then they're going to tell you what they can and can't do. The instrument doesn't, I'm just using the instrument to validate what they're telling me about them. So that's the whole key. The instrument doesn't dictate who they are. The instrument will help validate who they say they are if they have good awareness. Now, there's sometimes I think people don't have good awareness. And again, when you listen to them and look at the tool, it may give you some insight into that.
I also think that the tool of Place and listening to someone help someone identify not only where they will thrive, but when they will thrive.
Yeah.
If you are trying to launch a brand new ministry, it might not be the right season to put a very capable leader into a developing season. You might want to leave them in their management role, let a developer go into that opportunity, and then when that ministry has been developed, then give your manager that opportunity, move your developer to a new opportunity where they can develop and create as opposed to manage.
Do you know, if you look at the church I serve on the staff at, I've had about 3 or 4 different things that I've helped start that really are thriving now at our church.
You're not managing them, are you,
I'm
though?
not managing them at all. And you know what the interesting part of that is? And if any of you have ever started something and you're not good at managing, or and you go get the person that is good at managing, there's always a little ebb and flow of how do you hand it off, and if someone has any sensitivity, like they don't want to hurt my feelings, I can tell, well, I don't want to manage. I'm very happy. And I can think of those ministries at our church. They're way better running now that I'm not the one. But I don't know if those people that are leading them could have gotten them off the ground like I could, but I certainly couldn't manage them and improve them and make them even better. I couldn't do that. But that's a cool thing to be in a organization where that takes place. But again, when you're passing the baton, sometimes it can be a little clunky or a little not so smooth in the pass. But boy, think about if you're running a 440 relay and you do part of it. Well, if you had to keep running and the others were passing the baton, you would get slower and slower. And the other team would get faster and faster, but you give it to your teammate and they take it and take it to the next person. And that's what understanding yourself and understanding others really does. It helps you know when to pass the baton in the race. The race being a ministry or a business entity or anything.
A lack of awareness in that area could be considered a blind spot if you don't recognize that I am more of a developer than a manager, or I'm great at launching, but I'm not great at finishing. How could Place help you identify some other blind spots in your leadership capabilities?
Well, I think if you're a real opinion, if you're a D person, I'll just go through the 4 personality types. If you're a D, you can sometimes be really aggressive. And sometimes if you don't know that, then you can push people away because you're too aggressive even trying to get them. If you're an I, it can be a blind spot when the sky is falling, but you think everything is just hunky-dory rosy, everything is peaches and cream, and that can be a blind spot because you don't see that, no, it isn't, and we need to address this area that is not so good. If you're an S, if you're the leader, sometimes you got to step up. And it can't be, well, we're just all in it together. Somebody's got to lead, and if you've gotten the role, it may not be natural for you to lead, but if that's the role you've been given, you got to step up into it. And if you're a C, oh, why, it's so good for you to be able to see what things aren't being done right. But a blind spot could be, you can be too critical. And you can be too, where people don't want to work with you because you see things correctly, but you can be critical. Again, that's just the 4 personality types and blind spots. Or let's take spiritual gifts. You got the gift of leadership, but not the gift of administration. You can have a blind spot in thinking that you're great. I told them what to do, 1, 2, and 3. Because I'm a leader and I gave them, but you didn't tell them the details. What is the ABC of the 1? What is the ABC? And you can be playing way up here and have the blind spots up, but there are a lot of things that got to be filled in down here to get to here. So.
I think Place could also expose for leaders that they don't know their people that they're leading as well as they think that they do.
Yes.
Because you could have a very competent person on your team, but they have the gift of helps. And if you don't recognize that they need to be connected to you, and it doesn't mean they have to be micromanaged by you, but it could mean you need to have a standing check-in with them every single week or every other week. And that connection helps spur them on to more success.
Now I'm feeling convicted.
How
Because
so?
I think about some of our team members and how sometimes I don't check in with them. And I can feel that they get disconnected at times. I even when you said that, I was going through some people on our team.
I didn't say that to call you out. I wasn't thinking of you.
But it's a good thing to be called. But you're exactly right. If I don't, I could lose valuable people that feel disconnected. So, yeah.
And I think that's a call to every leader, anyone that you have influence over. You have the potential to make or break their experience by the environment that you give them, by the tone that you set. And I think when you recognize, maybe I don't know this person as well as I thought that I did, or when you take the time to invest in who they really are, they feel more valued, they feel seen and understood, and that helps their experience because they see they really want to know who I am. They want me to thrive, not just the goals to be accomplished.
Yeah.
How could a tool like Place help develop someone's leadership capabilities or skills?
Well, you can, I think it's as important to know what you're not effective at as what you are, and knowing that at times you can't just say, I'm going to ignore it. I know I'm not good at that, so I'm just going to ignore it. But if you know you're not good at it, but you're stepping into some places that you have to pull upon maybe a gift or maybe a certain personality type, if you're aware, then you can make the choice. You know what? I'm going into this situation and all of these people are new. So when you walk in there and act all aggressive and all super confident, as a leader, you push new people away. Tone yourself down and don't be so aggressive and so confident. Don't be not confident, but sometimes you can be too aggressive, especially with new people if you're leading them or trying to influence them.
So it's twofold. It can help you understand the strengths that you ought to harness and capitalize on, but also expose some of your growth areas that you need to work on. And sometimes growth areas aren't necessarily what you need to work on, but it exposes the people that you need around you. In the same way, you gave an example of someone with leadership without administration who needs someone to help them with the details. It could also be your personality style that you need to surround yourself with people who are different than you. My senior pastor at my church is a strong DI personality, so he's not good with details whatsoever. But his executive pastor is a C personality, and his administrative assistant is a C personality. So he knew the people that he needed to surround himself with. And when it comes to developing as a leader, it's just as important to know who you are as it is to know the people that you need around you so that you can all accomplish the goal together that you wouldn't be able to accomplish on your own.
And I think it's really helpful too. I remember your pastor, even before you went on staff there, he had just come to the church, and we took his Place profile on a Wednesday night and we put it up on the big screen, and I interviewed him and shared with the congregation who he was and who he wasn't, because Bucky and I wanted them to have realistic expectations of who he was as their pastor, as their leader, and who he wasn't. So sometimes it can be just as important for the people that you're leading to know who you are and who you aren't as it is for you to know. Because if not, sometimes they put unrealistic expectations on you.
Because as a leader, it is important to know who you are and to capitalize on who God created you to be, because you will be the most effective leader in that way. And for the people that you're leading to have realistic expectations of who you are. But there are also times where I think a leader has to adapt to the people that they're leading. How could Place help a leader adapt to better lead their people?
I think they can adapt to better lead their people if they know who their people are. And again, I'll say this again, my personality can be aggressive. And if you know who your people are and you say, oh, I know, if I get some people I know and they love my intensity, my aggressiveness. Others, it's like, are you mad at me? Or I've watched, and before I understood all this, it'd be like, can't you act excited and energized about that? And I'll never forget what your mom will say. Well, this is just as good as it gets. But if you know your people and you know that just because they don't act intense and driven like I am, doesn't mean they're not driven to accomplish, but it may not be in demonstrated like, oh, you know.
So adapting to your people is sometimes adapting or changing your expectations of how they communicate back to you.
That's right.
In light of how your communication styles might be different.
Yes.
I think also of the abilities part of your place profile, that's the environment where you will thrive. Oftentimes leaders create environments that naturally come to them. So if you're artistic, you create a very unstructured environment. A conventional person, on the other hand, would create a very conventional environment. A leader who is very social would always want to collaborate with people, but if they have an introverted, investigative person, they want to collaborate and then go figure out the problem on their own.
That's correct.
And a leader, while leading out of their strengths, also needs to recognize the environments where their people would thrive in, because that social leader needs to recognize, I need to give this person time to process and time to think. A conventional leader recognizes, I need to loosen the reins a little bit. I need to let them go outside of the box of the one that I've drawn so that they can thrive in their abilities, so that they can thrive in the environment that they thrive, not just the environment that comes naturally to me.
Yeah. This goes really fast.
It does. We got to wrap up today. But for the leader listening or a developing leader, what would be the thing that you would recommend for them to do?
Use place. I don't know how to say it better. We're going to have a link, I believe, to take our assessment. But I do think it gives you, as your mom says, it gives you a peg to hang on and a starting point to know yourself and to know those that you lead. Like I say, read one of the books I recommended, Are You Committed?, Building Ministry Teams, Too Great a Temptation. But I do believe starting with an awareness of yourself and then having an awareness of those you lead if you're leading others.
We hope this conversation was helpful for y'all, whether you are a ministry leader, whether you are just a leader in your household. A leader is anyone with influence over people, and the way that you understand the people around you will help you hold and steward that influence better. We do hope this conversation was valuable to you. We hope it was encouraging. And if you're more interested on how you can understand yourself better or how you can understand the people around you, I would highly recommend for you to go take the place assessment so that you can understand more about how the Lord has wired you.